What an announcement this was about an hour ago from the Daily Face-Off crew. We are starting to see commentary from David Pagnotta surrounding the Seattle Kraken as to whether or not 4th overall pick Shane Wright can be, maybe even will be, traded. Now, there were a number of posts on social media going out there and talking about the scoop, but the article on dailyfaceoff.com by Stephen Ellis gives us pretty much the entire scoop that we need. Dailyfaceoff.com is the source. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to go out there and read this article yourself. But it turns out the Seattle Kraken are open to trading Shane Wright. This is a pretty big deal. When the Kraken drafted Shane Wright 4th overall in 2022, it looked like they had their future superstar. But now it looks like his time in Seattle may be ticking down. The Kraken are 2 points out of a playoff spot, leaving many to wonder whether the team will buy at the NHL trade deadline, rather than become a seller. On Wednesday's episode of the DFO Rundown Insider Edition, Daily Faceoff's Irfan Ghaffar and the Fourth Period's David Pagnotta discussed the idea of Wright being shopped to bring in help this spring. Let's scroll down and read the transcript of what was said. Irf goes out there and says, the Seattle Kraken are an interesting team. As you look at the teams and identities and who they are and the type of game they want to play, but the big one for them is Shane Wright and the future of his status in Seattle. And my question to you is there a future for Shane Wright in Seattle? Good question, Pagnotta replies. What I can tell you is the Kraken are open to moving Shane Wright. And I think with what they've been looking for previously, they've been looking for a legitimate top 6 offensive threat. Ideally, somebody capable of playing on the top line. And the sense that I'm getting is a willingness to move and package up Shane Wright in order to get that. At the same time, I don't get the sense that Shane Wright is overly thrilled with his usage lately. I think the last game he played was under 10 minutes, and he wants to have more responsibility. He wants to have more ice time. He has to earn that as well. It can't just be handed to him. But there's a little bit of disappointment there with respect to his usage from his side of things, which is understandable. He wants to start taking next steps, but again, he's kind of got to earn that. At the same time, with Seattle looking to make a splash, and whether that's now or ahead of the deadline or something that they resume the search for in the summer, remember, this is a team that kicked the tires on Jordan Kyrou around the draft last year in LA. That's the caliber of player they're looking at. Whether they've circled back with Kyrou or not, that's the player that they're looking for. And the sense that I've gotten in talking to some other teams around the league, Shane Wright's name is starting to circulate. There is a willingness from Seattle to move him. They don't want to get rid of him by any stretch. This isn't that. But this is trying to find that fish that they can bring in, and they've got it. You've got to give to get. And it sounds like Shane Wright could be part of that if they go in that direction. But from all indications, talking to a few other teams, Shane Wright's name is out there. There is a willingness for Seattle to explore that, and we'll see how that develops. And that is a pretty big scoop for a guy that is a pretty big name. Now, Shane Wright, of course, may not necessarily be the biggest name in terms of what he brings right now, but there was always this idea that Wright had the potential to be a franchise-defining first-line center. 22 years old, 6 feet, 198, right-handed center drafted 4th overall by Seattle. We don't need to go into the entire song and dance as to how Shane Wright was even acquired by the Kraken in this entry draft. He was projected number 1, but he slipped to number 4 for a variety of reasons. Juraj Slafkovsky went 1st overall to Montreal because the Habs just liked what they saw out of him more. They thought that he was a unicorn that could become this totally unique and versatile offensive package. The New Jersey Devils didn't take Shane Wright 2nd because they already had Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier. They drafted for need at the 2nd overall spot. The Arizona Coyotes took Logan Cooley over Wright because they didn't think Wright would be available. They were just scouting and putting all their resources into evaluating Logan Cooley, and they were more confident with him in the 3rd overall spot. which left Wright to slip all the way to number 4, a reality that nobody really thought would happen with the exception of, I think, Corey Pronman in The Athletic. Shane Wright, if you go back over to his Elite Prospects page, he was ranked 1 by Elite Prospects, 1 by Future Considerations, 1 by Button, 1 by McKean's, number 2 by Bob McKenzie, and was the number 1 North American skater by NHL Central Scouting. The fact that he went 4th was a really big deal. But the unfortunate part about that is, despite the fact that Shane Wright had a pretty good first year in and out of the National Hockey League, a year where Seattle used him for 8 games, but then they scratched him for 2 weeks. They sent him over to the AHL because you're allowed to do that for guys that were 18 and they hadn't played as much as they had. He was playing with the Windsor Spitfires in the OHL. He had a playoff run with Coachella Valley. It was all over the place for Shane Wright in his first year, and everything went perfectly. This previous season, he had himself 44 points in 79 games. This year, he's on pace for only 29 points. So Wright had progressed upwards from year 1 to year 2 to year 3. But this year 4 has not really been all too great for him. And with the Seattle Kraken just outside the playoffs looking in, you could debate whether or not it's even worth it for them to consider trading a guy who's really just a middle to bottom 6 scorer for them for some immediate top 6 help. Wright, all of us thought, had top line ceiling potential, 90-point caliber play, a guy who would slow the game down and make some really good reads and had some stellar offensive instincts, a guy who would light the league up on fire. His scouting report here reads it's how he uses give-and-goes, off-puck skating, and positioning to obtain and then extend offensive zone time. The early passes that he makes really pop. Where most players try to beat the defender, he simply passes to the open teammate and lets them manage the space. He is probably the best runaway manufacturer I've seen at this level. Via the Elite Prospects Draft Guide. And it makes sense, too. I mean, you look at the scouting report. Elite Prospects said that Shane Wright had shades of Mika Zibanejad and Patrice Bergeron. And I know, like, when you hear Bergeron, you hear, oh, he's a defensive center. But really, Bergeron produced a lot at the NHL level, too. Shane Wright had a little bit more of an offensive touch to his game, I would say. But that was always the caliber of player that he was projected to being. Now, the Seattle Kraken are open to trading him, which definitely makes things interesting when you evaluate what his value could be. I'm not assuming it's going to be right for a guy like Jordan Kyrou straight up, 1-for-1. I don't think that that's possibly in the cards. I think that there probably need to be some more added there. But Shane Wright, for what it's worth, middle 6 guy right now, centering Jaden Schwartz and Capo Caco, hasn't really been given too much of an opportunity in terms of the minutes. He's been getting 9, 14, 13, 12 minutes per night. And obviously for a guy who is progressing towards being a top-line center, that's not ideal. So I can understand if the Kraken are kind of thinking to themselves, yeah, we could probably turn this player and the value he brings long-term into more value in the now. And for Shane Wright, hearing that he's potentially a little frustrated with how he's been deployed, that makes sense in my mind as well. So you can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about this update that Shane Wright is on the block? How do you feel about his future? Where do you think he's going to go if he does get traded? And do you think your team should go after this guy, assuming you're not a Kraken fan? Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Sign on. And bye.